Yeah. Hi, everyone. We are so glad you are with us today. And we were sad to miss everybody last week, but we had a death in the family and we were out of town. But we are glad that you are here with us, and we enjoy every Thursday at 5 o'clock Mountain Time with you. And we have a special guest. We know how much you guys love guests. And so we have James Martin with Mr. Sparky Electric with us. He's in St. George, and he is going to talk about things to prepare for when you are doing your electrical. There's so many things that you could put in to help and save you money in the long run. So that's what we're going to do. But we are going to turn. Keith, do you have anything to say?
Yeah, we'll start off real quick. It's kind of like electrical is a lot like surgery. When your cavity is opened up, and either down below or up above, you talk to the doctor. You say, "Hey, can you take care of that old mesh system I had for my hernia while you're at it?" And electrical is kind of like that. We don't think about all of the things down the road that we could utilize. I haven't talked a little bit with our guest James, but I was an electrician for about a year and a half, an apprentice electrician before I got advanced into construction management and stuff like that. So I do have my electrician's belt, and I can get on and I can pull wire in a home. But I can spend my time doing some other things. But I really identify with electrical because there's two components of electrical that a lot of people don't know, high voltage and low voltage. And there's a lot of new things with low voltage that a lot of people just do not know. Features in kitchens, features in bathrooms, up high, up low lighting, all kinds of stuff. And we'll talk about that today. And we're going to talk about a little bit of the forward thinking on electrical. And given that I have that background, boy, I save ugly things from happening. And I'll tell this ugly story, and then I'm going to turn it over to Martin and get some feedback and what really big picture items with this. But anyway, I was building a home for a real pain in the butt client. I won't mention the name. And I had to put the meter on the front of the house. The city code said I had to put it on the front of the house. Has to face the street. Sometimes they can put it on the side. Anyway, she didn't like that. And she went and hired another electrician, dug a new trench, pulled it out of the encased masonry that I've built for her, so it'd be hidden for the most part, except for the meter part. And then she ran it and remounted it on the back of the house, paid several $1,000s to do this without my approval. City saw it, and they made her move it. And so, again, if you really don't know what you're doing, you can mess things up with electrical. Don't assume too much about electrical. This is one of those subs. They're first at the job site and the last to leave. So they see the full spectrum of construction more than just about any other subcontractor. So listen to an electrician more so than just about a dirt work guy or anybody else, because they see and have run into every other sub you can imagine. So I hope that sets you up, James, for tell us a little bit about yourself and what you can offer people and why forward thinking on electrical is so important.
Yeah, I'll just add on to what you said. I like to think that electrical is the heart of the home. So it's what powers everything, right? Especially in this day and age.
Yeah.
So James Martin, I'm the owner of Mr. Sparky Electric here in Southern Utah. I've been in the industry 18 years, and I'll give you a little bit of my history. So I actually started in the commercial side, building some of your larger buildings. I was involved in the Utah State Prison, did a big portion of that, high rises, your data centers, your big data centers, usually nobody wants, hospitals. I want to work with IC, and have now started really into the residential side. Done a lot off and on over the years. Also built my own home in northern Utah back in 2014, and I've done a lot of helped actually a lot of homeowners with their homes as they took on trying to build their own home, and just giving advice and things to do, things to watch out for, especially from the electrical standpoint. And I also, I'll get into the personal side a little bit. Family man, I got 4 young children and a spouse. And they kind of run my life outside of work for sure. So, and, you know, within that, as you are planning your homes, if it's for a family or depending on what you're doing, those are all things that you're going to want to pull into that, you know, because it is, you spend, if you think about how much time you spend in your home, what are the different conveniences and et cetera that you're going to want to have. And you don't always think about that, especially when you're building a home. There's so many things to think about. And so I like to kind of put a whole checklist together of all the different things that are, here's your code requirements, but then how are you going to be using that space? That's really what it comes down to, so that you can prepare your electrical system for that space.
Let me ask you a question real quick. That I had a buddy in California, and he asked me to look at his electrical, and I looked at his electrical, and this is what people don't see sometimes, that a lot of times track building and whatnot, they can get away with a lot. And he showed me, I go, show me your main panel. And he took me outside, and it was a meter main panel. So he's laughing, he's smiling, he knows exactly what I'm talking about. Yeah. All of his breakers and the entire meter, everything was in one panel on the outside. And the problem is, in a humid environment, guess what happens? I'll let Martin explain to that problem.
Well, the components within your panel are going to degrade a lot faster. So the life of that panel, which is typically from the manufacturers 20 to 25 years, you may have just degraded that to maybe 10 years. You may start having more tripping issues. But that's in moisture areas, especially where you have salt, everything's going to fall apart a lot faster. So if you're in those environments, you want to just have your meter out there. You're going to have your main disconnect, put the panel inside the house where you have a better controlled environment.
So if there's a trip, you don't have to walk outside in the rain to go look at and I couldn't believe it. And these are very, very high-end homes, very expensive homes, but the electrical gives away the lack of quality in a home almost instantaneously. I can drive through a very expensive neighborhood and I can see, oh, they got the meter panel mounted to the outside of the home. They didn't consider trying to put a conduit and getting it all encased and buried so it's not an obstructive and ugly looking thing. These are subtle things, but custom building thinks ahead of all those things. Am I right?
You're 100% right. And just to add to that, so we live in southern Utah where it's a lot hotter. So if you're in a hotter climate and you have a panel that's going to be in the sun a lot, something to think about is when it comes to your electrical systems, your worst enemy typically is heat. So I get lots of service calls for even a main breaker trip, maybe an AC unit trip. The problem is that it's already generating heat, and now you're in the sun and the ambient temperature is 110, or maybe that breaker is now getting to 150, 160, and you are degrading the overload in that breaker, which means you're going to be replacing more often, you're going to have more nuisance tripping. And so when you think about placement of the panel, you really need to think about those things as well. And per code or per city or utility, they're going to require that meter and disconnect to be in a particular place on your home. You're not going to get around that, but if you can reduce the amount of components that you have on the side of your house, that's going to improve your experience and improve the life of your panel, your breakers, that whole system.
Yeah, I had a client that I was hoping to get a contract with, but he ended up taking another builder. But then he called me and asked me if I could consult. I go on the job site and he says, "Can you fill this wall?" And I go, "Yeah." And I go, "It's warm." And he goes, "Why is it warm?" I go, "I'm willing to bet your meter panel is right on the other side of that wall, right inside the master living room." And so a lot of times that's never even considered, especially in hot and cold climates. Even if you have a 2x6 wall, you put that panel inside there, that's direct conductivity. The 3 foot by almost 24 inches of section, the direct conductivity right inside the home. And very few electricians would consider putting an inch of polyiso foam behind that panel to help accommodate for some of that. It actually affected the temperature in his bedroom because it was facing directly south all day long. It was a constant warmth that was affecting the efficiency of the home. These are weird things, but they do happen.
They do. And one of the, in recent, say the last 10 plus years with EV chargers, that has really fundamentally changed the amount of power being drawn into that panel. They are the number one, let's put it this way, statistically, if you add an EV charger, typically you're increasing your power usage by 3 times. And you're adding heat to that panel, and that's also going to cause that to rise, right? You're going to have much more heat. And that's also probably, from my experience, it's actually become an even bigger failure point on a panel, because now, if it was installed 20 years ago, and now you're adding this large load to it, you're increasing your chances of having an incident with that panel and that power system.
Mm-hmm.
So,
same with the condenser units and stuff like that. I like to put them on the north side if I can, or even on where it's partial shade, but mostly late afternoon, mid-afternoon, getting those things out of that heat, especially in hot climates like we are building in.
Yeah,
it's a real downer. It can really affect the efficiency of the entire home on that. What else can you tell us about thinking ahead with regard to electrical?
Okay, well, we have a lot. So first of all, when you are planning on building a home, you really want to think about not just what are you doing in the next couple of years, what do you think you might do over the next 20 years, if you're going to be there 20 years or 30 years. I'm actually working on a couple projects. One of them, we're looking at upgrading the service to 400 amps from 200 amp service. Well, that's a pretty costly expense. And some of that expense might come from the utility because if they don't have a transformer large enough that's feeding that local community, usually they're set up to feed about 4 or 5 homes, they may be asking you to replace that whole transformer to feed, just have enough power for the other homes plus yours. And so you want to make sure you're thinking about those things. So that's just the very starting piece. And then thinking about, all right, are you eventually going to add a hot tub? Are you eventually going to put a pool in? Are you eventually going to, if you don't have an EV charger, are you going to be adding an EV charger? So you want to think about those power needs, because if you're going to install that, say that 400 amp service versus a 200 amp, you might be adding honestly $5, $6, $7, $8+ thousand worth to do that later. I mean, it could be $10,000. It's easy to get to versus just absorbing that cost early on in the project when you're building. So that's one thing, the service side. So really think about that. And you can get with your local electrician and just do a load calc on how much power you're actually going to need. The other item is leaving yourself options. So, and the way I'm going to kind of talk through this, we're going to start outside at the very beginning of your power, and we'll move into the home. So always leave yourself options. So down here in southern Utah, a lot of home builders and electricians like to recess the panel into the cavity of the wall. So what happens is now I don't have a route without most likely tearing out sheetrock or stucco to get underground or to go overhead. So if it's going to be recessed, then put raceways to get up into an attic or stubbed out underground. Maybe you're going to the backyard. I mean, it's the perfect time if you know, hey, we might put a pool in. Okay, get that conduit in the ground. Put an 1.5 inch conduit. Put it in the ground, stub it to where you might be putting it. And now you have that raceway, because most likely you're going to put landscaping in. And if you have to tear up that ground to get there, that's not going to be fun. Or if you have to go up through an attic, that's not going to be fun, and that's going to be costly. I mean, we're talking the additional cost can be anywhere from 3 times to 10 times more to do it after the fact versus just having simple raceways. And so it doesn't matter what panel you're putting in, always put in a couple of raceways that gets you to an access point. So now you have options to go anywhere in your home. So I highly recommend that. If you ever think you're going to put an EV charger in, I actually recommend just put it in anyway. It can be a big selling point when you sell your home and they've already got EV, and just making sure. So actually something that we get a lot of service calls for is melted 50 amp plugs. And here's what happens is they put an RV plug in, and an RV plug is intended for non-continuous load. Let me explain that. When a non-continuous load is something that isn't going to have constant power for more than 3 hours. If it's going to have constant power over 3 hours, that's considered a continuous load. And so people will plug into that 50 amp plug because it's the same size that you need typically for any EV charger. And what happens is it ends up melting because it's not rated for that amount of power for that amount of time. And so the plastic heats up and ends up melting and hopefully not causing a fire. So there is a specific plug you need to have, and it has a little EV card on it. So if you're plugging into that, that's the one you need to have. If you don't have it, that's the one you need to hire someone to come and replace with. So anyways, I do highly recommend putting an EV charger in your home, even if it's just right there by the panel or on the inside of a garage. Let's walk on the other things. So if you're thinking to put a hot tub in, just get the wiring in to an accessible point. Same thing with the pool. What else can we run into here? Let me step back a second. There's code requirements. So think about this. If you're buying a home and it was built by a builder, most of the time the electrical system is just going to meet code. So that means an outlet every 12 feet inside of the home and bedrooms. And there may be no rhyme or reason for that outlet. And it might be, if you think about a bedroom, say a master bedroom, perfect example, you know where you're going to put the bed. And most likely you're going to have a nightstand on one side and a nightstand on the other. Where do you want your outlet to be? Typically right behind that nightstand. And so when you're planning that portion of a home and you're going room by room, think about what the use case is for that space and set up the electrical system to support that. And I'm going to hit kind of hard on this one because we get service calls all the time for this. We'll go out to a home and they are using a lot of plug strips. And most plug strips are a 16 gauge wire, whereas your circuits typically ran with either 14 or 12 gauge wire, which has a higher ampacity, and they'll plug a space heater or they'll plug something into it that requires a lot of power, and all of a sudden it's melting, it's creating a lot of heat, generating a lot of heat at the outlets, and then eventually it fails, and you end up with, I have several melted outlets in my.
Explain real quick to people why they don't want to have outlets in 14-2 wire. They really want them 12-2 wire. Explain why that's important.
Well, it depends what you're using, but 12-2 used to be code for a long time, probably going back until, don't quote me, but about 30 years ago. Because it could handle the amount of power that you're using or ampacity. And so when you decrease the size of a wire, let me think, I usually use plumbing analogies here. So if the larger the pipe, the more water it can handle. The smaller the pipe, the less it can handle, right? And so if you're trying to use too much power on a smaller wire, it's going to heat up. And if you want to test a theory, I'll let you test a theory. If you have a 16 gauge wire, go and you have a saw, plug in that 100 foot with 16 gauge, run your saw for about 3 minutes, and then touch the wire and tell me if it's hot or not. Yeah. It's going to be hot. And that's because you're using too much power and it can't handle, with that limited amount of copper that's in there, the amount of power that you're using. And going back to what I was saying earlier, heat is your worst enemy when it comes to electricity. So it'll melt things. I mean, we use it to weld, right? Welders use it, and they're creating an arc, and they're generating a lot of heat to make that arc. Well, it's no different. No matter where you use your power, you're going to generate heat, and so you want to make sure that wire is large enough to handle what you're using it for. And so that's why you have specific codes in place for your kitchen appliances. You know, if you have an oven, typically you're going to have, it could be on a 50 amp. If you have your dryer's typically on a 30 amp. So we want to make sure that wire's sized large enough to handle the power, not generate so much heat that you end up causing a failure somewhere in that system. And also, number one goal of our code book is to, protect equipment and protect lives. And so we're trying to prevent a fire from happening in a home. So
let's take some questions real quick, but I really want to kind of emphasize this one thing. I've seen a lot of track home builders, and these were especially back in the day, and I still see it every once in a while, where they will take a 14-2 wire, which is the white cable. 12-2 is typically the yellow covering on it. It's thicker, denser, stiffer to use. But they'll wire 2 bedrooms, plugs, lights, everything on one circuit, and it's a 14-2 wire. And the electrician is grinning there because he knows that's going to trip every once in a while. Yeah. Because the 2 rooms you put one vacuum on, and somebody have the hair blow dryer, and the other one you're toast. And so I've seen a lot of builders. All my outlets are on 12-2 wire, and they're just a circuit here and a circuit there, and I break up as many circuits as I can. And the 14-2 with the smaller wire gauge, it's with LED lighting. You can put a lot more on that, but I don't confuse the real draw power needed with 12-2 wire with a lower voltage lighting system on the 14-2 wire. And I think that's where I've made my split. I try to separate those, and I tell my electrician over and over again on that. Comments on that, and we'll go to some questions.
Yeah, so that's 12-2 is a good way to go for anything that you're going to be plugging into the wall. To that point, I have a couple girls, and the challenge we have there is they want to use their blow dryer, and they want to have something else to straighten or something heating up. Well, it trips that circuit because you can only handle 20 amps, and they're trying to use 22. So we have that conversation all the time. But to that point, I think that's a good way to go. Definitely on the lighting, with all the LED lighting, 14-2 is great. We will actually tie quite a few rooms in for lighting, no problem, right? That's the beauty of LED, is it does not take a lot of power. And I highly recommend ensuring that your lighting circuit is completely separate from your power circuit. And I imagine many of you probably notice you plug the vacuum in, turn it on, and the lights dim. Well, it's utilizing that same power. And so that motor is going to draw a bunch of power because it's asking for it, which is going to drop the voltage, which is why your lights are going to dim.
And let's take some questions from Michael here. We'll take some. If you have any electrical questions, we've got the expert here on. So please ask anything away. Let's start with these. Michael says 2 things. How do you create build takeoff sheet? 2, I'm having a really hard time finding a ridge vent that is Class A rated and acceptable under a metal roof shingles. Guys, that's a really good question. If you look at the on the website, How to Build Your Own Home, there's a PDF, free PDF you can download, and I believe I have a Class A fire rated ridge vent that's there. If I'm not correct on that, message me through the platform, and I will find you a link for that. But download that PDF; it's free. Fire protection, it has to do with fire rated homes and Class A fire rated homes. But check that PDF, and I think I have a link in there for that. But if not, you just keep looking for something, and it has to do with the small grid-like pattern where air can get through, but an ember can't. And it has to do with the size of the screen inside that And if not, you can probably fabricate one if you knew exactly how small that has to be. But go there first and check that. Okay. Next question. I just poured a slab for my office shed. This is the guy in San Diego, if I believe, Michael. Tossed 2 sweeps in it, one for Cat 6 and one for electrical. Was planning 2 Cat 6 drops in each room when we get to building the home. Yeah. Maybe our electrician can explain the difference between Cat 4, 5, 6, and all that. A lot of people are really confused on that.
Yeah, so technology keeps changing. It's just really a rating system. Cat 5e typically is rated for 100 megabits, but it can go up to 1 gigabit. And Cat 6, you got Cat 5, Cat 5e, Cat 6, you got Cat 7, Cat 7a, and it just keeps going. And it's a rating system for what happens is some of it's the size of the conductor. So I want to say Cat 5e goes from 24 gauge, Cat 6 goes to 23 gauge. And then the amount of what you're trying to prevent is any noise from electrical systems that are going to hit that wire and disrupt the signal. And sometimes it has to do with twists, sometimes they add some filler into the cable, etc. But I believe with Cat 6, you can get up to 10 gigabit. Don't quote me. You could look up a chart on ChatGPT or Google, but then Cat 7 takes it to another level, but it's just communication level. Honestly, in a home, Cat 6 is, in my opinion, plenty for years to come. If you can do the hardwire, Cat 6 versus doing wireless, you'll always have a better connection. One thing that ends up happening in homes is we have all this wireless interference, and you end up having 100 devices that are wireless. You end up disrupting signals. Things don't function as well. So if you can hardwire things, you're going to be far better off.
Probably help for you as well. Yeah.
Yes, if you absolutely.
Leanne, what kind of scheduling system do you use in your business? Very, very, very good question. That's a hard question to answer. We are really hands-on, and in the self-managed course at How to Build Your Own Home, there's a build flow schedule, and that build flow really dictates scheduling. And my daughter and I, we are really hands-on. We don't use a Gantt scheduling system. I know in commercial, it's a different story. You really want to have an efficiency of time. But when you're building custom homes or even high-end luxury homes, it's really a hands-on. And there's a lot of expensive programs, Builder Trends. They're constantly calling me, Co-Construct, all these different platforms. But what I found is that the subs don't ever use them. So an email can go to them indicating that we've got a change of scheduling at our end. So therefore, you need to change your schedule at your end. And they never use the platform to message me to let them know. So I'm an email text guy. I do both simultaneously. I'll message the back end and I'll message the front end. Like I just was messaging, my daughter sent a message off to our trust guy, telling him on a job, we're doing stem walls next week. It'll be about a week and a half to 2 weeks. In about 2 weeks, you should do a site measure for your floor trusses. So plan on about then. And then they plug that into the into their computer. The more hands-on I have, the better my scheduling is. But that build flow schedule in the download section of How to Build Your Own Home, that's going to really help you see what's coming next, how to plan for that. What I want to do is try to help people understand the time frame it takes certain complexities of a build to get done. The more elevation changes you have in a home with different foundations coming different times, that's really going to put a damper in your scheduling versus a simple patio home or a simple stem wall. The more singular level you can make everything, that's going to affect your schedule. So just keep that in mind. And I'll that's a good post I'll have to plug in the coming weeks. But that's a good question. Lococo 21. Hope I said that right. Best spot for electrical panel. I'll let our electrician answer that question.
If you want to save on costs, whatever you can get closest to the kitchen, because that's typically your most expensive wire. But a lot of times I see them in the garage, which is typically a good spot. If it's single level, I do feel like a garage just outside the kitchen area. If it's a 2 level, depending on what you're doing on the second level, if you have any large appliances you're going to put on that second level, it's almost worth putting a sub panel in on that second level to feed those higher appliances. Same with the basement. The closer you can get that panel to the loads, you're going to reduce a lot of cost if that's what you're after. And you can, there's multiple places you can put that panel. But yeah, anytime, that's kind of what you want to think about. What's going to be closest to the loads that I have. Going back to the service, you really don't want to get your breaker box outside. You want to have some options there to feed other panels or tools or hot tub if you need to, but that's what I would suggest.
Okay. Good question. Underground main electrical to house or overhead if possible. Underground always, if you possibly can. Why is my electrician smiling and yawning at that one?
You just bring a lot more risk if you do overhead. And typically most utilities will have you run a larger conduit as well. So if you ever do upgrade, you have more options. But yeah, if it's underground, it's out of sight, out of mind. You don't have to worry about a tree falling down. And think about weather. So anytime there's weather, if you got cables slapping together, it's going to disrupt your power. Also, you increase, depending on where town, city you're in, if they've got a lot underground, you do reduce your risk of having lightning strike surges, which we didn't talk about surge protection yet, but yeah, that's all the above. There's no reason to do overhead.
Kind of cleaner too. It just looks better. And in a future solar flare that might just happen, like we had the Carrington event in 1859, all the cable wires and all of the telegraph stations just fried because they were above ground. If they were in a sleeve underground, who knows, that could have preserved the technology at the time. We're not hardened off. A lot of our electrical grid is not well hardened off. So why not just at least harden off your end of the scenario? My power here is underground by 12 feet.
Wow.
It's that deep. I didn't plan for it, but I had to come up to a pole at a certain angle, and it was really that deep. And so it's way underground. Underground is really preferred. Yeah. Next question. Kai Hoon. Hey, Kai. Can you share the price per square foot for stucco on dry stack veneer stone installation? I understand you do not do a lot of stucco nowadays. I'm trying to avoid stucco unless I can put it on some rigid mineral wool. I just don't like the polyiso anymore. It shrinks. And I've been asking myself, why does stucco look so weathered the older it gets? All right. Versus a nice cement board or something like that. And I come to find out the polyiso shrinks over time. And as a result, it just doesn't look great. And plus, a lot of the lath products they use, they rust. So what you don't see happening behind stucco these days is a grid pattern, a mesh system that's really rusted through because that stucco product is porous. Concrete is porous. It absorbs the moisture. So it's really a degrading wall, even though it may not look like it on the outside, but it looks like it's just not holding up over time. So I'm moving to more permanent products. As far as costs for dry stack, I'm not a fan of dry stack, especially in colder climates. In drier climates, it's not bad. However, it's losing its appeal. People are going with a full mortar stack on things, which I prefer myself. I've seen it be as close to $9 a square foot up to $16 a square foot, depending upon how heavy it is, if it's engineered or not. Those all weigh in. How hard is it to cut, or can they bust it up in pieces as they apply the rock? Again, it's how efficient the application is. Natural stone is always going to be more costly to install versus something that's engineered. So I hope that answers your question for you. So Michael, here in California, the meter has to be outside. Solar disconnects have to be outside. To place the electrical panel inside is uncommon here in California due to requirements, setbacks, wall sizes, and clearance. Are you talking about the meter panel or the sub panel?
Yeah, that's the difference. You may have a meter and with a disconnect outside of it, you should always be able to put a sub panel inside the home. And that's all we're talking about. That service outside is a requirement. Utility company, most places have to have access to that meter. It's considered their property. So
anything, well, here's the meter of the house, and the power is coming in right here. The power company controls everything coming right up to that meter. That's really their property. After the meter, it goes into their panel, and then it goes to maybe a sub panel or to your breakers with inside that panel. Once it hits those breakers, then that's your property basically. Okay, and that's your responsibility. Same thing with a water meter, a gas meter, they're all the same thing. Up to the meter, it's the utility company. After the meter, when it's supplying your house. Now, a lot of jurisdictions want main shutoff so they can come to a home in case there's a fire and turn off all power inside that home, so that main meter panel. But that shouldn't stop you from having a sub panel inside where you can shut off circuits independently from that main meter panel. So I know California is really, really weird on that, but I don't think they hold you back from having sub panels inside the home. So
yeah, that's, to that point, you have to have a disconnect outside. A lot of what that's for is actually for the fire department to be able to shut that power off if they show up. That's the way it is in commercial buildings, residential. So that's where I'll go first.
Good question. Travis Sant. Hey, Travis. Love me some Mr. Sparky. What's up? I think we both know Travis. Maybe. I don't know. He's a great guy locally here. Trent Fuller, thoughts on using a Schluter Curdy shower waterproof system? I haven't found a lot of tile installers who've adopted it yet, to be honest with you. I prefer an old-fashioned bladder system, especially when I'm upstairs on a main floor. I had a client who put in the Schluter system, put in Red Guard, just really did a bang-up job, drain, everything. It still leaked. With a bladder system, if you put it in right, it's almost impermeable for water getting down below. And so I have more tile guys who are experienced in that proven system, and I've had fewer problems with it than the Schluter system. Moving from one technology to another is kind of rough, especially when the bladder system is a really thick gauge rubber. The Schluter system is not built that way. It's completely different, and it's multiple applications that have to make sure that you have a secure seal. And then, of course, putting some Red Guard in. It's too many steps. With the bladder system, it's one step. You put it in, and you run it upside the walls. You run it up over the curb. You seal it right over that drain. Water goes into the drain. It doesn't come into the frame structure. And I know it's an old school, but I've not had any problems with it. So if I was doing Schluter, I would prefer to do it inside a slab on grade. So it's just straight up concrete that it's on. If it leaks, it's just substrate right into the groundwater, and that's minor, and it won't damage anything. But then again, you won't know that could be a problem over time. So that's just my take on it. I'm still looking and waiting to see if I can see a Schluter product that I really like. And I could be wrong. I know I've built very high-end homes with that product. Don't knock it. It's fine. I just haven't found as many contractors who are able to apply it and use it with comfort. So good question. David B, a long time ago, they used to put electrical outlets horizontally in solid wood baseboards, which left the walls clean. Why did they stop doing that? And can you do it today by code? Let my electrician answer that one.
Great question. Might be before my time. I don't have an answer for the baseboard one. Thinking about it, I am not familiar with the code that would prevent you from doing that. But that's a great question. I'll get that answered. So
I've seen them do it in kitchens where they have a very short backsplash because of a window or something like that, and they'll do them horizontally like that. And then I don't think there's a code issue that holds you back on it. Maybe not the TGIs, but GFI, maybe that might be required to be vertical. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, GFI is typically just for water basins or places where you're going to have any type of water. But yeah, I don't see. I mean, you can put 4 receptacles in. I don't see any reason there. As long as you're just meeting the minimum color requirements of every, your typical walls of every 12 feet, and I think the maximum height typically for that is standard is 18 inches. But I don't, from a safety standpoint, I don't see any issue there.
Okay, good question. Trent Fuller, would you recommend installing fans on back patio? We are in Juab County in some farm fields, and it tends to get fairly windy. Best type of fan for this?
Make sure it's rated to be outside, number one.
Yeah.
If you have a lot of winds, that's definitely a concern. It can definitely damage those fans. So there's a lot of different brands out there. You can definitely do the Home Depot, Lowe's thing. They're typically different brand names, but made by the same company. Or you can go to a higher end, like big, I won't say it, big A fans. There's some other ones that are probably better fit for that, especially on a back patio. It's going to move a little more air and probably built to withstand some of that wind force. But if it's like a wood blade, I probably wouldn't put that outside. It's going to eventually fail on you. You're probably going to want something that has a metal blade that's coated, powder coated to for that type of environment.
Okay, yeah, and just don't get wood fan blades. They do this over time, especially in the humidity. That's why it has to be outdoor rated. So a metal blade or vinyl blade would be the best, but don't get a wood blade. Even if it's rated for outdoors, if it's a wood blade, it's gonna do a number on you. Good question. Michael, electrical question. I want to try and save money when it comes to installing electrical in our build. I've wired new outlets, pulled wire, replaced receptacles, installed ceiling fans, can lights. Continued. Will an electrician be okay to let me do a lot of that manual stuff to save money and they do the panel connections, or how should I approach to save money? First of all, and I'll let the electrician answer some questions here. As an owner builder in just about every state in the nation, you can do your own work, but you just can't sell the home within 2 years. Typically, that's the standard across the country. But yeah, you can do your own electrical and all plumbing, but I would get an electrician on board, and I'll let Martin respond to that.
Yeah, I love that. Because I think it's great when homeowners are going to do their own work, and just having an expert in your back pocket to kind of help you through that process. I did that with my previous home with a plumber, and it was just, hey, can I get you to come out for an hour or two every once in a while, check my work, walk me through how I'm supposed to do something, and just negotiate a decent wage that makes sense. Definitely is helpful to have that confidence going into it by someone that's licensed and familiar. Have them wire up the panel and just make sure you're doing it right. But yeah, absolutely. You just got to be able to find somebody. That can be a struggle sometimes, but there's definitely some companies out there or an electrician that'll help you. But if they are doing the work, I will add this. It's something we didn't talk about. Just make sure whoever's doing that work in your home, that they're licensed, insured, bonded, and that they do have enough insurance to cover the value of your home on their general liability. Because if you do hire somebody and you're paying them and they don't actually have a contractor's license and they don't have workman's comp, in the state of Utah, they become your employee. So I will add that. Just make sure you hire someone that is licensed.
Yeah, and there's a checklist for electrical. There's 2 or 3 checklists. Make sure you download those in the self-managed package. It will teach you all kinds of weird things, like don't take a wire and put it right underneath the truss, especially with a snow load, because suddenly, you're going to have a short. That snow is going to put pressure on that. You're going to have a short. And never running your low voltage in parallel with your high voltage, all weird stuff like that. And that checklist is really going to help you a lot in that process. And it comes from a guy who was a former electrician. So I was able to put that together with some level of information, not as much as James here, but enough to at least help you identify some things you're doing wrong. Okay. Next question. Jesse99, not a question, but have been watching a long time and used your tips and videos to to find 5 developable acres. Thanks for all the free info. You are welcome. We appreciate that. Keep up the good work, and we love those testimonials. Rob, is it a problem to run each room off of one circuit, 12 AWG direct to main light switch box with half the outlet switched next to the main light switch? I like killing one breaker and the room is off. What do you think about that, James?
Well, that puts you in a position where you have more power in your room than most people do. Because usually it's 2 or 3 rooms. They're trying to meet code but do it as cheaply as possible. No problem with that, except for one thing that I do is I put the lighting completely on a separate circuit. So if you have to do work in a room, power-wise, you still have lights. So that's something to consider. But yeah, you can definitely, if you want to do half outlets and pull that tab on the break on the outlet and be able to control lamps or whatnot, you can definitely do that as well.
You can probably put 2 bedrooms on one 12-2 circuit, if I'm correct.
Absolutely.
I mean, that's where you can save some money. I do have direct 12-2, which is really a 20 amp circuit. I call them, one's a DD, dishwasher and disposal, one's to a bathroom. I don't like to daisy chain too many circuits or too many outlets on a 12-2 line. For example, if you have an outdoor plug and you might have 2 or 3 of those on the outdoor, you can daisy chain all those on one 20 amp circuit. But when it comes to a garage, I personally love 2 20 amp circuits in a garage.
Agreed.
Because I run a lot of power equipment. I'm charging stuff at the same time. And if I have 2 20 amp circuits, the most homes built these days, it's one 20 amp circuit. That's it. And really cheap homes that are still built every once in a while, and those in the past, you could find one 15 amp circuit in there, and that's just not enough at all. So.
No, and with that, if you're doing a switched outlet, make sure you use 12-3 to run to those outlets, because one will be for constant power and one will be for your switch. Right. So,
if you're doing electrical yourself, 3-way switches are going to be a beast. And GFIs, line in, light out. If you don't get that right, those are the 2 mistakes that owner builders make all the time. They don't put explain, James, on the GFI, what line in and line out basically means, so people can learn what that is.
I'm going to start with explaining what a GFCI is for. So if you think about in and out, all a GFCI is doing is making sure the same power that is coming to the receptacle is the same amount of power that's coming out of it on the neutral. If there's a difference between 5 to 20 milliamps, which is not a lot of power, it's going to trip. You want it to trip. Give you an idea, if you get hit with 10 milliamps at 120 volts, you're going to feel a pretty good tingle. When you get to about 20 milliamps, you're really going to start feeling it. And it only takes, I remember off the top of my head, I want to say up to 25 milliamps to stop your heart. So the point is for safety. So moving on, you want the power to go to the line side. That's what's feeding that device, okay? On the load side is where you're going to extend to your other outlet devices. And so by doing that, you're going through the GFCI to protect those other outlets. So if they're outside and you have one GFI over here and then you have 4 more outlets that are on it, it is protected by that device. So if you have a difference in power between 5 to 20 milliamps, it's going to trip.
And so I've seen a lot of electricians actually get that wrong several times. So they don't get the line in and the load correctly. They think the load is the power coming in, and it's not. That's what you're loading onto that GFI after you've already brought the line into. So line in, load out. That's how I remember it.
Yeah.
The 3-way switches, I don't even want to go there right now. It's too long to explain. It's very hard to explain 3-way switches. That's the hardest thing most apprentice electricians figure out, 3-way and 4-way switches. I don't even want to try to explain that right now. It's not that easy to explain. Let's go to the next question. Doug in Utah, how do you determine if a combination AFCI and GFCI breaker is required versus a GFCI? I'll let James answer that.
Well, Utah actually just got rid of the AFCI code, so now you don't have to worry about it. So you don't have to put an HCI in your home anymore. So I guess with a GFCI breaker, it just depends what you want to do. So I'll put a hot tub for an example. You can either put a GFCI breaker at the panel, or you can feed it with a normal breaker and put a GFCI at the hot tub. But it's all surrounded around typically water. So anytime, so you could, you have a GFCI in your bathroom that's on a 20 amp, required per code. You don't have to have it there. You could put a GFCI breaker at your panel. The key is that you're protecting that space so that someone doesn't get shocked.
Did they change the name on that? It used to be called just a GFI, which stood for ground fault interrupter. But what's the C for now?
Circuit.
Ground fault circuit interrupter.
Yeah.
That's the an acronym for what that means. Okay. Good question, Doug. Next one. Michael, should I just plan 14.2 for lights and 12.2 for most outlets as a basic rule of thumb? Yes.
Yeah, that's pretty safe.
Yeah, great. Well, James and I both agree with that.
Yeah, I mean, you think about just your standard vacuum in a home, it draws 12 amps. And if you're on a 15 amp, that's 15 amp. Now, per code, you're typically only supposed to load a circuit to 80%. So now you're there. And to your example earlier, you put a blow dry on it and just triple it.
Yeah.
But, you're just safer to go with 20 or a number 12.
Just to help you understand, a disposal and a dishwasher, that's one circuit typically. That's one 20 amp circuit. All right. And sometimes I've seen guys run them separately, even the dishwasher and the disposal separately. But that helps you understand the load calculations for that particular area inside your home. You wouldn't want to put a 20 amp circuit, a 12-2 wire, and power your dishwasher, your disposal, and all your outlets and GFI outlets. When you start doing that and overloading what its real capacity is, that's when you start running into problems.
Yeah, that's a good point. And in a kitchen, depending on your counter space, you only need per code two circuits, 20 amp circuits for a small appliance. However, if you have a larger kitchen and you have lots of counter space, I would highly recommend maybe adding additional circuits there, just so if you're running a lot of different kitchen appliances, which typically take a lot of power, you've got a blender over here, you've got a air fryer over here, and you're working on something else. Now you're keeping them separate so you don't trip those circuits.
Yeah, good question. Next question. Let's see. Hannah Banana. Keith, are you running a special on the self-managed package? My wife will answer that question.
So we've never done this before, but I just put in a discount. And I put Dream Home 15. So if you put it in there, you can get it. It will only last for the weekend, and then we'll take it off. This is the only time we've ever done it. So go for it.
Dream Home 15. Very good. Thanks, honey. Okay, next question. Lucille Ray, before we go, James, before we have some time, I want you to talk about low volt in the kitchen. So keep that in mind. I'm going to ask you that question if we have some time later on. Loco Coco 21, best way to stub power for future ADU or shop? Good question, James.
Simple. I would just at least get the conduit ran. I guess it depends on what type of ADU we're talking about. If it's in your backyard, I would get a conduit out there. I'd get two conduits, one for a panel, and then one for running some Cat 6 so you can extend your Wi-Fi. Or if you're going to put cameras out there, that type of thing, you can go get a switch. But just get it stubbed out where you think it's going to go, where if it's going through, if you're getting to a point where it's in the yard and it's not too big a deal to dig a trench the rest of the way, then just get it somewhere where you have access to it. It's size of conduit wise. I mean, for that, I think I almost always run like a 2-inch. So you have plenty of space, and always run like 1.5 inches for your low voltage, and you'll be safe.
It's not easy to pull thick wire through a small conduit. Trust me. Even with all the grease and soap you put in there, it's still not that easy, and I've done that.
Yeah.
Side point on that, the depth of your power. Sometimes it's a power trench inspection. And so power in our neck of the woods for high voltage has to be 3 feet down, 36 inches. And I'll actually inspect that. Gas is 18 inches, and water is based upon your frost depth that you might or might not have in your particular area. Right now up in Pine Valley, it's 3 feet down for water. Down lower, it's a little more shallow. So just check on those depths for your trenching. Even though it's after the meter, if it's permitted, they're going to come and inspect a power inspection to check for the depth of that. And if it's really, really rocky and you think there's heavy traffic that's going to run over it, they're going to not want to see jagged rocks thrown into that ditch and then compounded with pressure. I've seen a lot of things happen with conduit because I threw rocks in there, and I just recently saw it on a job. And so you want to be very careful. Embed it in sand if you possibly can. Just a few inches helps protect that conduit. Okay. Good question. Lucia Rayo. I'm planning to build a house off-grid with mechanical room inside the envelope. Can I have my electrical panel, etc., inside the mechanical room, or do I need to have something outside of the house? I'll let James answer that.
Yeah, you just have your service panel with a meter outside. You can definitely put your panel in that mechanical room. Not a problem there. Or if it's a sub panel, if you have a lot of equipment in there, you can absolutely do that. The only big requirements when you're putting it in there is just your clearances. You gotta have 30 inches of space for working space, and if I remember right, 30 or 36 inches in front of it. So.
Mm-hmm. And so what he means by a meter panel is that glass thing you see on the outside of your home, and you see how much power you're using. That's called the meter panel. That's called the main panel, and everything after that is a sub panel. So it helps you understand. Okay. Next question. David B, something else you want to pre-plan for is if you're going to do a big TV and a stereo in the room, besides pulling speaker wire for wall plates, put a separate 20 amp circuit for your electronics. Yeah, that wouldn't be bad.
Always.
Good comment. How do you design the electrical plan and identify what size breakers and route of the wires on a new build? Does it make sense to toss a sub on the other side of the house? A single level 3,000 square foot home. Let me answer that first with just one comment. The architectural drafts person will typically do an electrical plan, but it's not going to do load calcs or anything like that. It's just going to show where outlets and lights and switches are going to go. That's it. All right. Your electrician is going to have to meet code to fit with what your designs are. Am I pretty much right on that, James?
Yeah. Yep. You'll have to do a code calculation, make sure you have the right size service, and then also making sure you meet the minimum code for all your different appliances, etc. But you definitely, again, going back to what do you want your comfort in that home to be? You're going to walk through and you're going to want to understand what all the options are and make sure you have those options in place, whether you're doing it now or doing it later.
Okay. Yeah, thanks for that. A good question. A couple more questions here. Michael, the next question. So, yeah. So your question, in terms of stub power, this is from Kevin Garrett, for future use, if it's a slab on grade, can you explain how you'd stub power for future usage? Would you install a piece of conduit and cap it off to keep things out? I'll let James answer that one.
So I think it all depends on the bed. So slab on grade, I think part of that's going to depend on your roof style. Typically, your wherever you put your panel, you're going to want to have you're going to want to have raceways going up into an attic. If you don't have an attic and you want to go underground, I would identify places you might have future items, whether that's stubbing up in a wall, maybe close to the exterior, or getting it all the way outside. You really just have to think about kind of what locations. And me being an electrician, when I built my house, I just had stuff stubbed in places regardless of whether I knew I was going to do something there, because I knew it's so much cheaper to just get that conduit in the ground and stubbed up so that later on I'm not having to tear down sheetrock anywhere or go through walls, minimizing that impact. That's kind of key. So think about where you might plan on putting things. And if you don't know and you're thinking maybe here or maybe here, then stub to both locations and just have it there.
Yeah. And if you do put conduit onto a slab, make sure it's below the dirt, below the rebar, not on top of the rebar. If you do that, you're going to have a crack in your foundation. By code, it has to be below the rebar and below the dirt, in the dirt. Just do that and you'll be just fine. Okay. Next question. Let's see. We'll take one more question here. And then I wanted to talk to James about low voltage real quick. We'll go to that real quick because I think my wife's got a distraction there. James, we'll end it with this. Really, one question I have is a lot of people don't understand there are transformers involved in low voltage. And a lot of people don't know that, why that's important, especially for kitchens and low voltage lighting and all that kind of stuff. Explain how you deal with that.
So yeah, depending on what you're using, the biggest device is probably used is for ringing devices when people are looking at doing that. The problem is those ones, the one you have for your doorbell typically doesn't have enough power, so you end up replacing that. But you want to have those, if you're going to do under counter lighting, that's usually a big one. You're going to want somewhere to put that transformer. And it doesn't have to be necessarily in the kitchen, but you want to put that so it's an accessible location. You can put that in the closet, but then you want to route that low voltage cable over to where you're going to have your LED lighting, whether that's going to be a 12 volt system or 24 volt system. Is that what you're alluding to? Is those items there, Keith?
Yeah, that's that. And if you don't put it in an accessible open cavity, then it's buried. You're never going to know what's going to happen to it.
Well, it doesn't meet code. So you got to meet code. It's got to be accessible.
It has to be accessible. Typically in a full face plate that's covered, you can take off the plate and get access to that transformer. And make sure that you design and plan for that. And don't put it underneath the cabinets and something like that. You have to have access to that transformer. A lot of people don't realize that there's a transformer involved. Low LED lighting is being pulled from high voltage, and it has to have a transformer to reduce that power amperage. And this is something a lot of people, even though strip lightings and all the under cabinet lightings and putting lighting inside your cabinets to light up stuff, that's all part of that low volt scenario. Plus, low volt can tap into securities and cameras and all kinds of stuff. And I've seen costs on low voltage come up to double and triple the cost of high voltage. I mean, you can be a smart home fanatic and put stuff in your home that would be a cost that would rival any small ADU.
Oh, yeah, we could talk a whole hour about the low voltage side of things.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. Okay, we're going to end that there. Thanks, everybody. If we didn't get to a lot of questions, please check in next week. Go to howtobuildyourownhome.com. Take the First Steps course. I swear it's very informative and very helpful. If not, after that, there's a coupon code at the very end of that, and it will give you a discount on the self-managed package. So go there, How to Build Your Own Home. We'd love to see you there, and we're going to be here next week from 5 to 6 p.m. every Thursday, Mountain Standard Time. We'll see you guys then. I'll end this.